In this video, we're going to take a look at storyboarding, and we're going to have a quick demo of a storyboarding tool, which is Invision in this case. So why do we want to storyboard? Storyboard helps us to communicate our ideas with both technical and non-technical users. So we can make sure that we all understand what we're going to get when we finish our story or when we finish our feature. It helps to make sure that we are working on the right tasks. One big thing is it helps us to consolidate screens as well. And this is a major reason why I use storyboards this early into the term. Because a lot of times people want to jump in and start writing code. But a lot of times if I take a look at a design document and I see a storyboard with maybe 14 screens, I can give some guidance and say, that's far too many clicks, far too much click depth. Think about how to simplify your program, and that's going to make your life easier because it's less work that you have to do. So, an example, sometimes I'll see a screen that links to a search screen, and all that's on that search screen is maybe a search text area and a search button. You'll click the button, and then you go to a result screen. You'll click on the result, and then you go all the way back to the first screen. Many times this can be consolidated all in one. You can just have a search bar at the top of your application, and anytime the user searches, have it fill in with results. So you can really consolidate screens like that and save yourself time. So, save time, measure click depth, and as we like to say, measure twice, cut once. So, with a good prototyping app like Invision and with Fluid UI and several others out there, you can have something that really looks like a live app that you can test out in front of users and make sure that your usability assumptions are correct. So what are some good storyboard tools? Well, there's good old PowerPoint if you just want to throw some things together. And that works well enough for communicating an idea. Probably would work well for our class as well if you just want to show what things look like. There are a couple other tools that are really meant for storyboarding. One is called Fluid UI, and I used that exclusively up until recently. I actually used it for quite a long time. Still definitely something you can use. When I started using it, it had more of an open model, and then it went to more of a commercial model. And it said you could only have something like, I think, one free project. In the older model, I had like 6 projects in there, and so I kind of got into a funky situation where I'd have to delete stuff to go back and use it again. So definitely usable. I have a video that covers Fluid UI if you want to look at that. But the one I'm going to take a look at in this video is one called Invision, which is used very frequently by UX designers and other user experience professionals. I have gotten a free student account for everybody in this class. I will post the code up on our learning module, but nonetheless, when you get that validation code, you can come to this page, which I'll also put in our learning module announcement. Just put in your validation code, which I provide to you, all of the other information, and then get started, and then that will allow you to download Invision. With our educational account, you have a license which includes unlimited collaborators and unlimited prototypes, and this license is good from now until 6 months after you graduate. So you don't have to use Invision, can use Fluid UI, PowerPoint, something like that. But if you're interested in using Invision, this is a great way to get in. Now when you start up Invision, this little launcher screen will appear. And you'll see across the top it has different default canvas sizes for things like a phone, web, and tablet. Now it's a little tricky, but if you get your mouse right on this triangle, it will let you pick something else, a different type of phone, like a Galaxy phone, Google Pixel, so on and so forth. There are some resources for learning, and also some tutorials as well. I found some really good videos under their website, just different ways to do different things here. So getting to know Invision and using things like layers and components and art and stuff like that. So there's some really nice videos out here if you just want to take a look at this. Now, nice thing about the tutorials is that some of them come with samples. So like there's some sample layouts, sample animations, and things like that. So nonetheless, let's go ahead and get started. I'll say Google Pixel 2, and it opens a little screen for me here. Now, starting off, it's kind of interesting because it feels like, well, okay, where do I find buttons and things like that? Let's get orientation a little bit. First of all, we're using an artboard here. We can have multiple artboards if we wish, And an artboard could be a screen. It could also be a different state of a screen. So you could have a screen and have a modal pop up or some kind of toast pop up. That you could exhibit that through two different artboards. So some things we can do there. Now, if we want to add something like a title, we go to Tools and you'll see Rectangle. And now let's just drag and drop a rectangle, and you'll see that's fairly straightforward. Fill. We can give this a fill color. I might go with Plant Places Green, which is 13654A. Let's see, yeah, that brings up kind of that greenish color, just like so. Now I can choose one more. I can say Tools, and let's say Text. And I'll click over here and type something. So we'll say Plant Places. Now we go over to the right, and we can choose a few things like fonts. We'll stick with Arial for the moment. Fills, once again. We can expand on fills. Whoop, just a moment. I just have to make sure I select the entire unit. Now let's come back in here. Let's use another hex code that I use frequently with Plant Places, which is D6BD91, just like so. It kind of comes up with a cream color. Works fairly well with that background. So, okay, that looks pretty good. So let me go ahead and drag this guy, and a little center line snaps in, and there we go. Now I still have the option to put maybe some menu options over here, maybe a hamburger, something like that. Nonetheless, you see I now have a title bar that kind of has a consistent look and feel. So maybe I want to make a component out of this. So I highlight the entire unit, and I click on this little Create Component widget here, and we're going to call this Plant Places Title, just like so. And there we go. It looks just like that. What's nice about this component is we can use it in multiple artworks. In other words, we can use it in multiple screens. And it will have a consistent look and feel here. If we decide that we want to change things, like maybe we want to change the font of this text here, it will change universally everywhere this component is used. Let's go ahead and choose Done, and we see, just like so, there we are. So as a matter of fact, why don't we go ahead and add a new artboard. So we'll go to Tools, and we'll say Artboard. And we need to pick the type of artboard. We'll go ahead and go with Pixel 2 again. And now let's take a look. Do you see, if I go to Libraries and I go to Components, do you see this Plant Places title that we made earlier? You see I can come up here and I can drag and drop it all as one unit once again. And I have that consistent look and feel. As soon as I line it up well, I have that consistent look and feel that navigates from one screen of mine to another. There we go, just like so. So speaking of which, you start to build up these component libraries, and you start to have a whole bunch of things that help you prototype very quickly. And that's a good tool, these component libraries. As a matter of fact, one way to get very productive very quickly with Invision is to look for other libraries that are out there. So I've come up with a few here, and I'll link them into our learning module. There's one on material design. There's one called Do, which has a bunch of free design resources. You see, just have a little download link here. I've already downloaded these just in prep for this video, but nonetheless, download it like so. There's Design Tools, which is a collection of different icons. So if you want to get a bunch of icons really quickly to put together an idea, you can just download this and then import it into Invision. Let's see how that import works. First, let's assume I've already downloaded those different libraries. Now I'm going to go back to Invision. I'm going to go to Libraries and click the plus, and here's the Deck UI Studio. And so we'll add that. Give it just a moment. And notice when I click on this, it gives me a whole bunch of other options here under Components. We'll just get this size so we can see it just right. And you see I can click, and one nice thing is it gives me a preview of the components down below. So things like a border, things like a header, things like a button, so on and so forth, makes it really easy to put together our application. I'll go ahead and grab one more. So we'll go back up from Deck, and we're going to grab Do, just like so, and open. And Do's a little bit different. When you click on it, you don't see anything in Components, but if you go to Open File, you can see a whole bunch of predefined screens that they have with a whole bunch of components. If you're looking for some really snazzy UI components like pie charts and stuff like that, really nice UI, this is a good place to look for that. Let's add one more. So I go ahead and hit the plus, and we're going to go to Design Tools Icons, and we're going to grab this one and choose Open. And so here you see Design Tools Icons. This is that component that just has a bunch of different icons if you want to have a bunch of different icons like that. So these libraries, if you grab them, go out and take a look for what they have. There's a page here on free design resources that list a bunch of these things, these resources that you can plug into InVision, and has a lot of those common components. Let's go back now to our screen, and I'm going to add a few items at the top. I'm going to go to Tools and Text, and at the very top of my screen I want to have latitude and longitude values. So we'll say latitude, and then I'll grab another one and say longitude. And naturally each time I'm just going to Tools and then Text, or you can just type T. Either way will do it. So here we'll say longitude. And we actually tend to not use colons in when we're labeling things in a mobile application, just because it's one extra character. So let me go ahead and take those out. I'll add a few more. So let's try it this way. I'm going to click and type T, and you see that brings up that little type something component. So we'll say latitude, line that up just like so, and we'll give this a number like 39.74, which is roughly Cincinnati. Go once more and type T, get our little widget. And for longitude, we'll say minus 84.51. That's roughly our longitude in Cincinnati. And again, try to get that lined up just about like so. And now I'm going to add a rectangle. So rectangle we see is an R, or actually let's make it a rounded rectangle, make it more like a button. So I add this button. Now you see I can go down to fills and I can pick that color that we used before. I just type in D6BD91 just like so, and it gives us that similar kind of gray color. Now on top of the button I can add text again, so I just press my T, and just a moment. And we can type in pause. Now we avoid doing what I just did. In other words, text is generally, it takes longer for a user to process text than it does to process a button, or an image rather. So we want to consider how we can use images and things like that instead of words like pause. Let's go ahead and save our project. So I'm going to do save, and I'm going to just call this one plant. Well, let's see, we'll navigate up one directory there, and we'll call this Plant Places Storyboard. And there we go. Now let's navigate to Pages and Page 1, and we're going to see our Artboard 1. Take a look at Artboard 1. We see the component, the Plant Places title that we made before. Now we have all this stuff around GPS which kind of goes together. If we're only going to use it once, we probably don't need to make a component out of it, but we can make a layer out of it. Watch what happens now as I select this unit right here, and I'm going to right click and I'm going to say Group Layers, and it puts it into a group. And I'm going to rename this to GPS because that's going to be our GPS information across the top of the screen. Now that we have them as a group, you see we can hit this little eyeball to show that group and unshow that group. Also, if I hold down my Alt key on Windows keyboard, that changes into a lock. And the lock basically means that that component is not selectable. So it just kind of becomes part of that background in case you're selecting and creating other components. Now, one thing that's common in modern UI design for mobile apps is this principle here. Take a look while my cursor is on a text area that says plant name. As soon as I start typing, that plant name goes away, and you see it's an autocomplete, so I can choose Cercis canadensis eastern redbud. That's what's called a hint in Android programming. And the underlying motivation is that we're trying to reduce the number of widgets that are on our screen. In other words, make the app simple and easy for a user to use. Don't distract with a label and a text box. Put them all together in one. So you see the label is essentially embedded in the input view. Here we have location. I can start typing Cincinnati Zoo, and you see as soon as I start typing, not only does an autocomplete come up, but that hint label goes away. Description, I can say spring, bloom, something like that. So by embedding that label, or what we call a hint, inside of our text box, we get 2 for 1. We don't need a separate label and a separate text box. So let's make a component that resembles that. I'm going to go to Tools and Rectangle, and we'll just kind of put in a rectangle here. Make it a nice, easy rectangle. Just like so. And of course, we can fiddle with the background color. But the more important thing is the text I'm going to put on top. I just type a T, So I get my little text prompt, and there we go. And we'll take this type something, and I'm going to line it up in here, and I'm going to type in plant name. But here's the other part. We will go ahead and we will grab that, and we'll do a few things to it, like we'll make it italics. And we might also change that background color to indicate that it's a hint. So italics we have so far. Fill, maybe we'll pick kind of like a medium gray like so, or maybe something even a little bit more subtle, just like that. That'll work. Now let's grab this entire unit, and we'll click our little component, and we'll call this one hint embedded text box. I'm not going to click go to component master. We'll just go ahead and choose done. So now you see we have this thing called a hint embedded text box. I can grab another and drag it right down below. Or actually, I'll tell you what, let's go to, let's go up to libraries and document, and now hint embedded text box. Let's grab it from here. And we'll make one more. And now this one, here's the neat thing about having this as a component is I can change this text locally and it will not affect the master. It only affects the master if I'm in that little components widget. So we could say plant name and then location, and then I believe we had one more which is called description. So we'll go ahead and grab our hint embedded text box and try and line it up roughly like so. Double click here, and we will call this one description. Okay, looking great. Now we need to add a few buttons, and I realized also I missed the GPS age, but not to worry, I can go back and fix that. So we want to add a couple buttons, maybe a save, maybe an open, and maybe a photo button, something like that. So what we'll do now is we'll go to tools, and we see rounded rectangle is a U. So I click on U. Wouldn't be a bad idea to make a component out of this one because they're going to have similar sizes and shapes. But nonetheless, I click the U, I go to the fill, and we'll put in one of those fill colors that I like. We'll go with the D6 BD91, just like so. Whoops, D6 BD91, just like so. And there we go. Okay, yeah, let's go ahead and shorten it up just a little bit. So I'll take that one, I'll copy it, and I'll paste it just a few more times so we can get this button bar towards the bottom. Naturally, we could do some things to kind of even these out a little bit. I'll leave that one up to you, but what we're trying to mimic is this save, open, and take photo right down here. So let me click on this lower item. And let's say I want to add an image. I'm going to go to Tools, and I'm going to go to Image. And I grabbed a few images from the Android Asset Studio generic icon generator. We'll get into this more when we're doing our actual layout in Android Studio, but it's a nice way to make very consistent images that we can use across our application. So I made one with the save icon. Again, I'll walk through those steps in a separate video, but nonetheless, generate an image however you want to. I just happen to choose that save icon, and now I'm going to go to save icon, and it creates different resolutions. I might go ahead and choose M, and we'll grab our icon and choose open. And you see it has our little save icon. I can put this over here, and I can either make a component out of this or I can just group them together. Group probably makes sense here, so we'll go ahead and say group. We'll go back to our pages and we'll rename this one. I'll tell you, we'll just click like so, and we'll rename this to save button. Okay, and you see I could do that for each of the other images. Not going to worry about it right now for the sake of time. As a matter of fact, I'm going to go ahead and, well, not choose artboard. I'll tell you, we'll do rounded rectangle. We'll just represent some kind of image down here which represents a picture of a plant, and we could easily fill that in with something, but this is just going to represent the image of the plant, and that will essentially wrap us up for designing our first screen, except for one thing, and that is the ability to link to other screens. Of course, there's a lot more I could do with this. We talked about the other UI kits that I can use and some of the predefined components that they have. So a lot of snazziness I can do there. You see, here's a header. This one's quite nice because it comes with that cheeseburger menu or the hamburger menu and a title. Lots of things that we can do there. But nonetheless, what I want to do now is I want to show how we can link from one screen to another, and then how we can demo. So let's say we make this our open button. And what I'm going to do is either click on the lightning bolt or just press the letter C. Either way will give me one of these little guys that I can come and click over here and say, okay, on click, I'm going to go to Artboard 2. Now, let's go ahead and go from our component in Artboard 2. Let's go ahead and go from this title component back to our original page. So once again, hit the lightning bolt, and now we get back and forth navigation upon click. And once again, save my application. Now, let's take a look at a couple of options. We can go to a preview mode here. In the preview mode, it takes our home screen, and you see I can click on it, and now I click Save. It takes us to our save screen, and we go back and forth just like this. This is a really nice way to demonstrate your app in front of an audience, especially if you have a lot of clickable components. Just make sure that your app is easy to navigate by running it past a group of these people and say, hey, how does this look? Don't give them any hints. Just say, try to use this, try to do this feature, and see if they're able to navigate. If they're able to navigate, great. If they have challenges, go back and reconsider your design and how maybe you can make it easier to navigate. So this is how to demo the application from InVision Studio. Another option that we have here is this little Publish to InVision button here. So I click on that, and I'm going to choose Publish. It's going to upload this to a URL, and then I can simply click this little pop-out icon. And then it takes me through a similar walkthrough using a web browser so we can try our click back and forth components. Now here you see it's rendered with our top nav and our GPS and all of the other things that we have going on. Let's see what happens when we press this button. We press this button and it goes to our what's now a blank screen, but we'd eventually want to fill this in maybe with a list of plants that we have saved. And then we can click back. So you see that this URL is something that we can use to play through the entire application and the entire storyboard, even if we don't have InVision installed. So what I recommend for you in your design document is list this URL, but also go back to InVision and also export your project. So do a file and then export selection, and export it as an SVG, and then add that to your design document as well. So both the URL and the SVG export. And then again, walk through this with your users. You can even collaborate with your fellow group members because this is set up for a team collaboration as well, the license that we have. So you can collaborate with them offline. Walk through this. Even though it's exciting to jump in and start writing code from day one, don't neglect this step of doing the storyboard because it's going to save you a lot of time in just making sure you're focusing on the right project first. I often say don't start with the main menu screen because it's distracting to the user and it puts everything at the same priority. Don't start with the splash screen unless you absolutely have to, unless there's something that's loading in the background. Don't start with a login screen because that tends to dissuade users from trying your application, number one. Number two, we can handle login separately with things like Firebase, which we'll cover later this semester. So spending time on a login screen now would be a bit of a waste of time. But with a nice prototype, you can get an early idea of how you can consolidate screens together. And you can ask yourself, do I really need each of these widgets on my screen? Could I replace a button with a swipe? Could I auto-save? Do I need a save button? Maybe I just automatically save and then allow the user to go back to a previous point in history. That's a concept that we use a lot in mobile design. So, but then also we know that we can use this to try out our design on our user and make sure it's something that's appealing, because one of the holy grails in Android development is that we should not have to have very verbose help text. Instead, we should rely on a design that's intuitive to the user. Storyboarding will help us to get there faster. So I hope this video has been helpful, and I look forward to reading your comments. Thank you.